Welcome to another episode of the Alignment Podcast. Really excited to have our guest here with us today, Andrew Lott. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here, man.
Yeah, so Andrew, we met a little bit ago. Andrew helps to run a company that is international, and I'll have him introduce that a little bit more because he'll explain it better than I will. Andrew, to get started, could you tell us a little bit about where you've been and what you're doing right now and what you're most excited about?
Yeah, of course. So I run KapTek with one of my buddies. So essentially what we do is international software development. We're an outsourcing partner, and we also have an in-house team that does software development. But the thing that's interesting about us is we hire exclusively from Armenia, which is a little small country in Eastern Europe that not a lot of people have heard about, including myself before I went there. But the thing about Armenia is they're very good at software development. You know, certain countries have their little niche, and Armenia just happens to be software development. So we got into this business about a year and a half ago, me and my co-founder, and it's been great.
That's awesome. What makes it different than traditional when people think about, offshore software development? What makes
Yeah.
KapTek different?
So, I mean, the biggest thing is I would say the quality. I think a lot of people, when they hear offshoring or international development, they think, okay, this guy's not going to speak very good English, or, the quality is going to be kind of you get what you're paid for. Armenians, they kind of live and breathe tech. So, like I said, very small country. It's about the size of Utah County geographically. So not very
Sure.
big, but their output in tech is that of a country that's much larger. And I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but their tech sector is just completely booming. So the quality is it's through the roof. So a lot of guys that we've worked with will come from other outsourcing destinations, and they'll say like, oh my gosh, like it's like this guy's in the room with me, or he's putting out, I think he's working 80 hours a week, but he's only putting down that he's working 40, if that makes sense. So just shooting way above their weight in terms of development.
That's awesome. So I know you have a little bit of history with Armenia. Was it,
Yeah.
how did you stumble upon like building this culture of, quality and high performance versus, there's a million ways to make money.
Yeah.
And I think people, find the most fulfillment when they're intentional about it.
Right.
How did you guys stumble upon this? And
Yeah.
what's kind of been the intentionality behind what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of got into it because both my co-founder and I, we lived in Armenia for a period of time, and we kind of noticed that a lot of the big dogs in tech were hiring from Armenia. So NVIDIA, AMD, Microsoft, Synopsys, all these companies are coming here, and we're like, oh my gosh, like they've got to know something we don't, right? We did a little bit more, we did a deep dive, and we're like, okay, these guys are really good at software development. So we're like, okay, how can we, turn this into something? How can we find a way to get into this, kind of contribute? And obviously there's outsourcing companies out there, like in Utah specifically, there's 3 dozen that I could name off the top of my head, but a lot of them their main value proposition is price. And that's what drives a lot of decisions when you go to outsource. Is like, okay, I don't have the money to pay 10 dudes in the United States because developers are going to cost 200 grand a pop, especially if you're in California. And Utah's a little bit cheaper, but so price is the number one factor. And so we decided, okay, we're not going to try and compete with them. Like if NVIDIA is hiring these guys, AMD, like they're going to get paid. You know what I mean? So we kind of position ourselves as more of a boutique software development firm. So obviously you're still going to save some money over guys in the United States, but it's just going to be that much higher quality. And then we put a lot of work in on the back end to make sure our guys are the highest quality guys, both in development, but as people as well. So we go for family guys. We go for guys that we want to go over to their place and eat dinner, if that makes sense.
Is that part of the interview process? See how good of cooking they
Yeah,
are.
see if they can cook. I mean, it usually turns into that. I mean, you go through a couple conversations with these guys, and they usually invite you over to their place. And so, because I live in the States, I don't get to go as much. But my co-founder, he lives in Armenia full time with his wife, and he's been sending me a lot of photos. So a lot of good dinner photos.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
aside from the cooking, what do you look for when you're looking to bring somebody on? And how did you come up with that? Did you just stumble upon, wow,
Mhm.
these couple of people ended up being really good, or
Yeah.
was it more intentional around building that culture of people that you bring on?
hmm well, I mean, first we go through just a couple screening calls, and then the first thing we look for is technical ability, obviously. So we'll do a couple technical screenings. We have like tests that we have people take. software development tests, things like that. But then after that, it does come down to, is this guy going to be a good fit for the company? And usually for that, we will bring in, that'll be like the final interview with the company itself, whoever the guy is going to be placed with. And we bring them on and we kind of let them have the final say, like, okay, who did you mesh the most with, if that makes sense. So on our end, it's mostly just kind of a vibe check. Like, okay, would I want to work with this guy myself? And if not, then we're not going to pass him on. We've had to tell people that a few times, but yeah, mostly it's on the client side. Like, do you think you're going to mesh well with this guy?
How does that usually go for them? Is it just, hey, would I want to hang out with this person, or are they a little bit more intentional about that? Or do you see a variety of ways that companies go about that?
Yeah, it's a lot, it varies completely company to company. I mean, sometimes we'll hire on, for a group of 5 guys, right? It's a small startup and they're much more concerned about the culture fit. I'm sure as a founder yourself, if it's only you and 3 other guys, you want to make sure you're not going to pull each other's hair out. Versus larger companies of 100, 200 people, they're not as concerned about the fit. They're just kind of like, all right, let's get him on. Can he get the job done? Can he push our numbers forward? So we've seen a couple different ways. Usually these smaller companies are more intentional and they'll have more phone calls and they'll bring on different members of their team that come on, see if they can all communicate, get along and that sort of thing.
That's cool. As you continue to grow, how many people are there right now working with you?
About 45.
Okay. As you continue to grow, how do you foresee that process changing? Or will it stay the
Yeah, we
same?
definitely need to automate that a little bit. So we've automated all the technical stuff, which like I mentioned is the more important part. And then everything else just is kind of a vibe check. So yeah, we need to find a way to automate it. And that's more of my co-founder's wheelhouse. I'm just kind of on the sales side. So I'm not really sure.
No, that yeah, that is it. It's a challenge, right? And how how have you guys changed the way you're thinking about? I mean, you've been doing this for a year and a half, so I mean, AI was here a year and a half ago, but
Yeah,
it's way more, ingrained in the development process now for a lot of people than it was a
definitely.
year and a half ago. How do you approach, especially as you test people's hard skills? How do you approach
Hmm.
AI in the development process?
Well, so there's some things we can test on. Just for example, I have a background in mechanical engineering. So if we hire somebody who has anything to do with mechanical engineering or, light coding like Python, whatever, I'm usually pretty good at screening for that. But for example, excuse me, last week we hired for a guy that they do drone manufacturing and drone shows. I don't know anything about drones, you know what I mean? So we
Yeah.
relied really heavily on AI to say like, okay, this is like the repository that we're dealing with. This is the language. Give us a test that is going to test all of this. And then we, of course, we send that out to the client or send that out to the candidate, get it back, upload it to AI and say like, okay, how did he do? Let's be honest. And then we compare that against like one of our other guys who would take the same test and say like, okay, how does he compare against this benchmark? You know? So in that way, it's more automated. But again, cultural fit, I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, because I was thinking that your answer was going to be more around, you know, are you pro or against a candidate using AI in the testing?
I
But
see.
I
I
think
see.
also that's a really interesting take of,
Mhm.
how you're using AI to assess that.
Yeah.
Have you guys caught anybody using AI when they shouldn't have been?
Actually, not as much as you would think. Not as much as you would think. And usually we've actually had people fail interviews with clients because they had a bad answer regarding AI in the way that you wouldn't expect. For example, Armenians, they're still very hesitant on AI. Like they use it to speed up their processes and stuff like that, but they're not going to let it code for them. They're more old school in that way. And so, for example, we had a lady who was conducting an interview and she wanted him to say that he leans on AI and he's pushing the boundaries of AI. And he's like, no, I barely use it. Everything's my own code. And then she didn't like that, and she ended up hiring somebody else because he wasn't super pro AI, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Was that somebody else through KapTek or a different group?
Yeah, that was KapTek. Yeah. And so we tried to
Okay.
convince her, we're like, no, no, trust me, like he can use AI, yada, yada, yada. But then she just ended up liking somebody else more. And so it worked out.
Yeah. That is really interesting. Do you see more and more adoption, or is it still pretty slow in terms of
I mean,
developers using AI in Armenia?
yeah. I mean, I think they use it as much as they need to in what's currently available, if that makes sense. So the answer I get from pretty much all our guys is they use it again to just fill out the mundane tasks, speed stuff up, but the bulk of stuff, they know that it's going to make mistakes. So even if they use it for, 5, 10 lines of code, they're going to go back through and manually check it to make sure everything's okay. So they adopt it as it becomes better, but they're not over relying on it, which I think a lot of people do nowadays, especially if you don't have a background in coding. Like, for example, myself, like, again, as a mechanical engineer, you have to code a little bit, and I relied heavy on it. These guys, it's the other way around. They don't use it as a crutch. They just kind of use it as like a, jetpack, give you a little bit more boost when you need it.
That's cool. Do you, as you guys continue to grow, do you foresee that you'll stay pretty boutique and niche, or do you think
Hmm.
where's the ceiling to KapTek's growth, and what types
Yeah.
of people does that associate you with in terms of customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to be boutique, just the nature of what Armenia is. They just demand more money here, and that makes sense. They're just higher quality developers, like a lot of our guys rival the talent in the States. And so we're never going to be able to just say like, all right, well, you're only going to get paid an eighth as much as you used to get paid. You know what I mean? So, and I think that's good because then it kind of puts us into the category of dealing with companies that are already established and they're willing to spend a little bit more money to get the best possible product. So it's been nice because we don't have to, like, I'm sure the hardest sale is the guy with no money. You know what I mean? And they're going to
Yep,
be
always.
the problematic client who's saying like, oh, when's my stuff going to be done? Yada, yada, yada. So it's been a lot easier in that respect. So, and I imagine it's going to be, you know, consistent. As far as ceiling goes for KapTek, we're working on a couple things, just more like in-house product lines and stuff that'll kind of increase revenue in that regard. But I can't say too much on that just yet.
Stay tuned, right?
Stay tuned.
Yeah, that's awesome. What types of, right? I think around my experience and kind of stereotypes that I've heard. So I mean, a little bit of context. I don't know if I told you this. So a year, 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, I was working on
Hmm.
a startup within a blockchain incubator that was a software
Okay.
developer productivity platform.
Yeah.
And we tried to sell heavily into offshore dev shops around
Hmm.
the premise of, hey, people have bad experiences. Can we help you overcome that by proving that your developers are good,
Interesting.
instead of,
Yeah.
just having a really good salesperson come in?
Right.
Um, what stereotypes are you battling as you try to sell, dev services in? And are there people who eventually end up viewing, some of these Armenian developers as an actual part of their team?
Yeah, there actually hasn't been a lot of stereotypes. I think a lot of people associate Armenia with other Eastern European countries like Ukraine, Poland, and usually people have dealt with countries like that before and
Yeah,
they've had good experiences. And so I just kind of tell them like, yeah, it's going to be similar, like similar English level, but like the productivity is going to be even better. So really no negative stereotypes at all, which has been awesome. Sorry, what was your second question? I lost.
that's a great question. I was listening too well. I don't remember. Yeah, it was, you answered
If
two and one.
people were able to kind of view them
Yeah.
as a member of their own team. Yes, pretty much everyone. Pretty much everyone that we've hired on, except for some people will hire on for just like a 1, 2 month project and they're viewed as a contractor from the get-go, then yes, they're kind of their own separate entity. But for the most part, all these guys get integrated very quickly. Armenian culture is very family oriented. And so these guys, they get onboarded and then they're texting their colleagues saying, like, hey, what's your name? I'm so and so from Armenia. You should come visit my place. Like I'll feed you. Come visit my family. Like I have people, our clients, hit us up all the time and say like, "Hey, I need to book a flight. Like, these guys are awesome. Like, can I buy them tickets to a soccer game? Like, how do I?" These guys are great. So yeah, they pretty much all view them just as normal employees, if not more so.
That's awesome. Does that
Yeah.
does that require some vetting on your side when you're looking at potential customers to ensure that, their
Mm,
existing culture will fit that, versus, if
absolutely.
they're hoping kind of like a silent developer who's not actually
Yeah.
part of the team, that's probably not a great fit.
No, yeah, exactly. We at the get-go, we had a couple when we were more desperate for clients, we're just kind of taking anybody on as you do when you're first starting up.
Yeah.
We had a couple clients who were, they thought of our employees as just they're contractors. We don't care. Once the project's done, we'll cut ties, whatever. And so, yeah, we've kind of moved on from that. And so we turn people down unless it's like, okay, we want long-term engagements. We want you to treat these guys like your actual employees. We want to figure out a benefits package. We want to figure out, how can we get these guys as integrated into your ecosystem as possible rather than just like a disposable, because a lot of people like they think like, okay, they're not from America. They don't live here. They're not my employees. Like it doesn't matter. But we're trying to turn that around and say like, no, these guys are, you know, they're every bit as much of your company as you are, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, as trying to think of the best way to say this, the some people who offshore and try to kind of bulk produce
Hmm.
whatever the product is, whether it be a bunch of code, often treat offshore resources, saying they treat them less human. Sounds really
Hmm.
bad, but
Yeah. Well, I
it's
understand completely.
they're
Yeah.
far away,
It
and they're
happens.
often are not as relatable, and so it is really cool to hear that you guys are like putting the humanity back in offshoring.
We're trying, because a lot of people, for example, well, I don't want to say for example, I don't want to call anybody out, but certain companies, they'll hire offshore and then all their communication will be written. And so it's like you just can't really develop a bond with anybody if it's all written. Like it might be ChatGPT, it might be Google Translate, and like you're never gonna know. You're never gonna have a chance to develop that bond. But yeah, all our guys, they're very personable. They're making phone calls, they're having FaceTime calls, and they're also talking to us. Like I said, my co-founder lives in Armenia. He hangs out with these guys regularly. I go back to Armenia once or twice a year. I go meet these guys. So it's very easy to kind of develop that like home like company culture, if that makes sense. So even though
Do you
like some
think?
of these guys, they're working for XYZ company, they're also working with KapTek and they have their own KapTek identity as well.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a ceiling to that family like culture?
I don't think so. I mean, like, look at Google, like everybody who works at Google, they have their weird little hats and they love their job.
Yeah,
And, once you're at Google, that's kind of your identity. And so I don't think there's any limit to it. We just need to as we grow, we just need to keep being as disciplined as we can about making sure everybody feels like they're part of the team.
that's awesome. That's way awesome. Well, cool. If people want to follow along with and learn more about KopTech, where's the best place for them
Mhm.
to find you online?
LinkedIn's probably the best. KapTek, KapTek, or follow myself, Andrew Lott, Lott. We've got a website. We don't have a vlog or blog or anything, so LinkedIn's probably the best.
Okay, awesome. Well, Andrew, this has been fun to learn more about how you guys are being a little more intentional and selective about providing quality offshoring and how you're building that team. It sounds awesome. So thanks so much for your
Yeah,
time. This is a fun conversation.
awesome. Yeah, thanks to you as well. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, man.